specific development areas. As David said, there have been some pretty powerful counties going to the legislature for a while trying to increase authority. Anything certainly that would it'd be statewide granting of authority to counties is going to be more difficult than possibly something targeted for a specific county, and maybe something a bit small to start with, might be the way to go on that. If it's statewide, it goes to the state calendar and there's all sorts of things. It becomes a lot more difficult to try and have a blanket for all counties to have certain types of increased authority. Sometimes it might be better doing it with a single county or a coalition of counties. And one thing I would just add, and this is easier to say than to be the people doing it. We have had not so much counties, but some cities in our area that have waited a long time for opportunity to come their way. And they're like, we've been waiting 40 years, to get an Applebee's or whatever it might be, right? Or Chili's, and we want to, or a certain type, or we've done 20 housing permits a year for so long, I can't tell you, and now we got requests for 200, and they get excited. Sometimes folks feel that this is their only opportunity. This first company or developer approaching them is their only shot at taking advantage of that, and it's not. There are folks lining up to do development in our region, and one of our cities, Pearland, to the south, which started out quite small and has grown very large. Mayor Reed, who sits on our board, often says that he never regrets having been pretty strict on what types of development could come in, because it only got better each time. Each time the next developer that came in knew that they had a certain threshold they needed to meet, or they weren't going to get time to talk to people about making it happen. So they came in with not just a threshold, but a little more. And so that can be difficult to say, nope, we're going to pass on that and wait for the next one. But there are a lot of opportunities out there.
And I would say the challenge is for counties is to determine what the role should be, versus the city. I mean, I know Harris County, everything they write about and so forth, they feel like their role is to compete with their towns and cities. So even though the majority of the people in Harris County live in the 34 towns and cities, Harris County is working on that. It has this chart it's always showing about around 2018, they've got more people in the unincorporated area than they do in the city. What is that competition about exactly? I mean, who's gaining from, what's the point? So in your case, how do you provide? I mean, I'm really thinking there's a big agriculture thing, and I remember Commissioner Beckendorf, I had a meeting with you 2 or 3 years ago, and you talked to me about some ideas you had about agriculture that was a much more focused kind of agriculture that returned more dollars per acre and so forth. And I thought it was really exciting, and I don't know what's happened to all that, but that's a good path. When you look at that agricultural urbanism thing I just showed you up there, that ag land is being sold by the foot, not by the acre, to people who can only handle 5 acres or something like that, But for a farm, that works, if you're a person who lives in the city and you're going to come out on the weekend and do 5 acres in this place that has all these tools and all this stuff to use and knowledge and places to sell and so forth, or you could live there. I mean, those kinds of things, seems to me like that's because agriculture's been your background, hasn't it? I mean, that sort of so go for it. That's what everybody knows how to do. It's different now, obviously. Nobody's growing rice so much anymore. It's arugula, right? Or whatever it is that we're all wanting, and that we're all starting to be happy to pay for local stuff. We just had another farmers market open up in Houston over the weekend. We must have 20 of them now, and they're mobbed all the time, because that's what people want. So
I was just curious, have any of y'all had any discussions with Twinwood developers, the folks that are developing what's called Twinwood? It's going to be a pretty large development. When you showed your map earlier on I-10, south of Brookshire, starting at I-10 and Woods Road, the reason I bring them up, I met with some of their engineers. They're in the planning stages. But conceptually, what they're envisioning for right there near I-10 and Woods Road is exactly what y'all are talking about. It's a high density. They're talking to some universities about having a satellite campus and then having the high density mixed use, like City Center at Beltway and I-10, where you would have the condos and shops and stores and a Central Park concept. So, I mean, there are areas, and that's a developer doing that on their own that are moving in that direction. So it's very interesting because, and that was one part of your slide where you weren't really showing a lot of growth, but if that happens, it could be huge, especially in that area.
And it's a really big thing that's happened over the last 5 years or so, and the Woodlands had a lot to do with it. It's like no master developer anymore is planning a master planned community of any size without a center. You know, I mean, the Woodlands always had the center on the. I've seen the back of the envelope that George Mitchell drew, and they always had that center. But it took them 30 years to start building it. You know, now it's in place, Sugarland. So everybody wants that now. So people don't want to live in a place that doesn't have a center that they can walk to. So if you're going to do stuff out in the county that's not in a town and city, you ought to make sure that's what they're going to bring you. You know, a place that's got, you know, those places are okay. They work like towns and cities. Now, they eat your land up, but they don't eat up as much land as, you know, typical kind of sprawl does, because they get it that people are going to want to walk to that center or ride their bikes and so on. So I think you're moderately safe that any high-end developers, at least, they're already expecting to build basically a town. Pretty small one, but still, you know. But some of them, like Bridgeland, you know, you got 30,000 people. I mean, these are huge places, right? So that would be something to watch for. You know, the possibility of if somebody's going to build out in the county, say, okay, give us a town then. You know.
Any other questions? Oh, yeah.
I had two quick questions. First, when you had the map where they took a section of land and basically squeezed everything into a quarter of it, what were the average lot size on that? Because I know we talked about, you know, your average lot size is 50 by 100, and then when you condense everything, what was the average lot size?
Well, the average lot size on the non-condensed part would have been more like 75 by 100 or even a.
What was it when you
Well,
condensed it?
well, that would have been much smaller. It would have been, a lot of them would have been 50 by 100 and even 30 by 100.
Okay. And then my second question you know, I love the fact that you go in and kind of do almost like a renovation or a facelift to the old town squares and love the history and the small town feel. In the instance where we do go and have people come in and invest in doing that facelift, how can those businesses survive without the community support in the small towns? Do you have to wait for some development to get here? You know, what comes first? You know, I guess the chicken or the egg. But or do you wait till you start getting some residential development and then do the facelift? Because it doesn't matter how nice you make it. You know, a prime example is like La Centera in Cinco Ranch. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that. It looked almost identical to some of the models that you guys had, where you have a center and all the small shops. They didn't put La Centera into Cinco Ranch until it was over half developed.
Well, I'll just
It's been extremely successful, but you know,
Yeah.
I guess that's what my question is where do we start? Because I think that's a great model.
Well, I think you start both. So my own personal, I moved from Clear Lake into the east end of Houston, which is just east of downtown. And so we're very much wanting new supermarkets, new this, new that, you know, in this redevelopment. But the developers always tell us, well, we can't bring in that nice supermarket you want until you have the rooftops. Well, we can't get the rooftops until you bring us that nice supermarket.
Right.
So, you know, but places have still sprung up, the Heights, et cetera, because a few pioneers do come in, and, you know, if you can do some kind of a public-private partnership as well, you know, we don't do a lot of that in Texas, but we do in certain places. You know, you choose a certain building, a certain corner, just, you know, sort of kickstart stuff happening, and then the rest comes.
I would say that's a huge challenge for a lot of our communities. And the ones who have been the most successful have focused not on bringing people in to visit that small town. Making it nicer to come into town and making it look nicer is also good for people that live there. And so if you can make it, if you can think about making that a nicer place for people who already live in the community to go spend a little time there. Seating, shade trees, having it feel safe, fresh coat of paint, that can make a huge difference. And then not just letting that be the only thing, but people have also come up with a little event or a festival or something that kind of helps focus it on downtown. The communities that have a lot of folks who leave that downtown area to go live somewhere else or go work somewhere else, and that place pretty much doesn't have anybody in it a lot of time, they have a lot harder time. There's one in southern Brazoria County that's trying real hard. They're doing the facade improvements, they're doing the street trees, they're doing that. They have a couple festivals a year that pack it out, and then they're having a hard time with it. So I would say start small, start targeted. It's amazing if you can just get seating in, but if someone's walking around downtown where they can sit on the bench for a while, trash receptacles, those make a huge difference. The paint and the improvements, some of the businesses pick it up, some don't. It's just kind of the way that goes. One more thing is a number of our communities had an interesting phenomena happen. Sometimes the best buildings that have the most potential are owned by foreign investors or people that at a minimum live out of state, if not out of the country, and you can't get them off center to do some of that work. And so that's really hard as well. So that may not answer your question, but there's a lot of challenges with it. But start cleaning it up first.
Well, I was gonna say back, just my own neighborhood, the East End again, we have an East End Management District, which is kind of its own little, it's not like a TERS, but they do have some authority. So just some very simple things. They've taken intersections, they've made the little bulb outs that we're talking about. There's a navigation boulevard, which has been a pretty low down kind of boulevard. They took some of those funds, they made what we call an esplanade there, seating, etc. We just had the farmers market, the first farmers market that came. So this is all public investment being made, but now there's a townhome community that's being built there that must be 300 or 400, maybe not quite that many townhomes, but then has come in as a result of that. So I think it's first that kind of public investment, not a big one,
Yeah.
but enough to really bring people in.
Just one more quick thing, the facade improvement program in Bay City that David had in his slides, the first phase of that was a $25,000 program. So it wasn't, the city put in half, HJC put in half. And so for $12,500, they were able to get that started, it caught on, they did a second phase after that. So, it doesn't have to be a huge investment, but it can make a really big difference.
Of course, the dream is, you're a kid who grew up in Berkshire or Hempstead, and you went into Houston, and you became a lawyer, and you got rich, and you want to retire, and you want to go back home. And you bring all your money with you, and you say, oh, God, I'm going to put up a restaurant right in the middle of, whatever. A place to look and maybe ask questions, because I've been driving through Sealy for every Friday for 5 years because of where my farm is. And I've noticed that their main street has slowly, it was dead when we started going through, there was nothing on it. And it's slowly coming back, and I haven't stopped to see why, or, they've done some nice greenery in the middle of the street, and the buildings are starting to be occupied. I mean, you might go ask Sealy, how are they doing this? How are they pulling this off? Making it, and maybe I'm just inventing what's happening, but it's starting to look pretty good to me. So. Yes.
John Isom with the City of Waterton Economic Development. Some of the
Can you reach that far? Can you get to it?
loop around.
In water, we've been in the local center program. We appreciate all that HGAC's done to help us and encourage us with that. We're in the phase where this fiscal year we'll be doing the engineering design for the local center concept and plans on that and construction next year. Several of the themes tonight include things like how do we maintain our open spaces in the county. The county has a lack of authority to do a lot of directing of that. The tax return on compact building is much higher than spread out building, sprawl. And everybody likes the pictures of, renewed downtown spaces, those public spaces like that. And I'm wondering if all those kind of, and then the question is, what can the county do to accomplish all that? It seems to me it kind of all coalesces in supporting the cities within the county in a very strong way, encouraging, supporting, and however that can happen. The more that happens, the more you get the good stuff in the compact building in the cities, and the less pressure there is on building out in the natural resources and all that. So I don't know exactly what that means, but somehow encouraging, supporting, working with the smaller cities, I think is one answer to that. One of the questions I've got is, there was recently a approval of a plat for a subdivision called Wood Edge, which is 5,000 homes way out on the very northeast corner of the county, where there's some mobility problems, it seems to me. And Woodhaven, okay, I'm sorry, Woodhaven. So to me, that's the opposite of encouraging and kind of trying to push the development into the compact areas. And that may have been previous core, I don't know. I'm not sure exactly when that was done, but to me, that's the either or. Do you have huge subdivisions way out where they're going to have mobility problems, or do you try to build up the cities that are already there?
Well, I think, listening to what we've said, that our answer is focus on places where there already are people and where there already is infrastructure that's underused. And people say Houston is like this monster place. Something like 40% of Houston is underdeveloped. And where you say someplace, I keep hearing people say, like I went down to Friendswood, 10 years ago, they asked me to come talk to them about this smart growth stuff at their planning department. And they said, we don't know what to do, we're built out. And I had been, before I talked to them, I went and looked at their main intersection, which actually had a post office still, and I said, there's a post office, and then there's a vacant lot, and then there's a place that has 2 tractors on it. I don't know if they're selling those, and it's like, it's empty. Your downtown isn't even there. You haven't even started to build out. You can't replace any of the houses you've got out there, but you've got this, 20 acres of downtown you haven't even started on yet. And I'm going, yeah. So, and now, I don't know but they're doing it. They're doing their downtown. So this built-out notion is one that I'm always amazed by, because even Manhattan doesn't think it's built out. It's constantly putting more and bigger and all that. So no, you're never built out. Why did I say that? That was not in response to your question at all, was it? Sorry. Yes, sir.
One of the things I was a little disappointed, I guess, in not hearing in your presentation was a mention of state parks or public parks or open areas. We've got the Brazos River bottom, and we talked about the importance of that road in the eastern Galveston area. And yet throughout your presentation, I didn't see one thing that talks about preserving those parks. We had San Felipe across the river, and yet as much Texas history took place on this side of the river, but for Waller County, we might not have had San Jacinto. And so what about public parks and how they come into play in our growth?
Yeah, thank you very much, because I was...
Can we repeat his question there so people know what's going on?
We didn't say anything about public parks, and he talked about the value of some historic parks that you have around here, and why didn't we talk about that? And I will just tell you that I spent most of last week up near Bastrop at the National Children and Nature Conference, which was just off the charts amazing, where people are talking a lot about parks everywhere in the country. There's a new program that the Park Service is starting, I think, right away, which is that every 4th grader in America can go to any park in America for free for a year. And they're hoping to keep that going for 20 years, so they get 20 years worth of 4th graders seeing parks. Anyway, there is a lot of focus on parks. There is a lot of understanding of how important they are. And so I don't know what you have here in the way of parks other than what you just told me, but I mean, we just didn't have time to get into the green space aspect.
We don't have any parks in Waller County, and that's why I asked about the importance of parks. We don't have any state parks in Waller County that I'm aware of.
But I mentioned that the highest value land is usually right around the park.
Right.
And it needs them in the city.
I guess a couple things. I'm glad you brought that up, because a couple things are happening in the region. with regards to large park systems, or looking even at national designation, have the same person involved with him. There's a gentleman named John Now who owns Silver Eagle Beer Distributing in Houston, very wealthy philanthropist, very much into history and heritage tourism, and he is building a visitor center down by the George R. Brown in downtown Houston that will actually be an experience where folks who are in town for conferences can say, hey, if I'm going to spend another day in the region or two, where can I go find out about Texas history or see some of our great natural assets? And so they've been inventorying a lot of this stuff well beyond the 13 county region, and there's a lot of work that's going to be coming out probably in the next year to kind of get people, if you want to go learn about, you know, history on the Brazos, here's the places you can go to see things. And as that starts to drive people out, then improving the appearances of those downtowns and those gateways and other things is going to be important too, because folks may actually venture out into those areas. There's also a large effort on the coast that extends from the end of the Bolivar Peninsula in Galveston County, across Galveston Island, down across Brazoria County to Matagorda County along the coast. And that, I think the latest name might be the Lone Star National Recreation Area, I believe is, and that's unique. They want to seek national designation. They want to go to Congress to make that a national recreation area, not a national park where all the uses are prohibited, but a national recreation area that ties that whole area together, where it can be huge for ecological tourism, for recreational fishing and boating, for heritage and history as well. And so they're actually going to take that to Congress. So that's going to be the first one that will probably go through, and then they're looking at other areas. So there's probably a lot of potential for that.
All right, everybody gonna stand up. That's right. Make us stand up on this. Well, I think there's two things on parks I'd like to address. How many of you have heard of the Powderhorn Ranch? Well, nobody's heard. A few of them. I was in the news a little bit, maybe 4 or 5 months ago. Big park down in Lavaca County, long, kind of big heritage ranch that was purchased with some money from the Restore Act and some other things, and some Parks and Wildlife, and maybe some sugar daddies went in there as well. You know, and held as this great ranch because it had this unique area that had never been plowed, etc. We have the Powderhorn Ranch in spades here in this area, coming and going, those kind of areas. So it's a recognition that we need to realize what we have. Lavaca County has maybe, 25,000 people living in it? We got 4 million people, plus. Going to be 8 million people. So there's great stuff here that we need to be acting to save right now. The other thing I think that we need to talk about open space, not so much open space, but parks, is the value of parks for civic space. So how we talked about that sign, never see your neighbors. It's about seeing your neighbors where you live, but it's about having spaces where you act, where you have a chance to have serendipitous interaction with your neighbors. And those are going to be parks. So no place, no city, nobody should be more than a quarter mile away. It'd be better if it's an eighth of a mile, but nobody should be more than a 15-minute walk from a city park where you can interact with people and have a little interaction with nature as well.
Thank you, gentlemen. Any other precincts 1 and 2 questions? Commissioner Ansler?
Just an announcement from Precinct 1. If you enjoyed tonight's gathering, come back here again next Tuesday, same time, same place, for Commissioner 1 Amsler's Town Hall meeting. And at my Town Hall meeting, we'll be expanding on this subject a little bit, but I'll have probably about a half dozen speakers from a number of the entities in Precinct 1, including the City of Hempstead. We'll have a real fun time of it. We'll have a little bit of entertainment, a little bit of singing, and lots of fun, I hope. So next Tuesday, 6:30 p.m. here at the Hempstead Theater. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Some more questions?
One second.
No.
How can we get copies of the slides?
Should be easy. Well, one way is if you have one of those little flash drives, I can just give it to you tonight.
I'll have one of these.
No, and the other way is it'll be on my Dropbox, which I can send that address to Bob, and then how you can let everybody know. You should have had a sign up, or you come. Oh, well, come here. Yeah, we'll take care of you. That's easy. So, and otherwise, can we figure it out? If I can get it to you, can you figure out how to give it to people here? No.
Well, I'm not a secret. If you can send me the link address, if you want a copy of the slides, my email, just come grab me. I'll be glad to give it to you. It's not a secret. So just come on down after we get through here, and I'll tell it to you. And then you can have a copy of the slides too. Are there any other questions? Gentlemen, commissioners and judge, any other questions from you guys? Any questions out there else? Well, in that case, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your attention. Commissioners and Judge Duhan, thank you. I believe everybody here could agree that we have had us a workshop tonight, and I appreciate all of your participation. Thank you.